World Financial Group offers entrepreneurs from all backgrounds the opportunity to start their own business on a level playing field. Dr. Yana Woodhouse, receiving the WCM Wall Street Pioneer Award by the United Black Wall Street of America, Inc., is one of those entrepreneurs.
I see WFG and TFA as a place where African Americans with an entrepreneurial mindset can flourish. And the bonus, we help families and serve the communities across the country.
To learn more about us, go to worldfinancialgroup.com.
We are the sons and daughters of the soul. We are resilient and forever forward-thinking. We ask for nothing else than the opportunity to live and to create the lives that we were meant to live. We want nothing but an equal chance at options and possibilities. The same possibilities and options to live out our potential as our fellow man. We want to be heard, understood, and expressive in our reality. We are the future. We are the creative. We are here.
This is Kia Rogers, and you're listening to Urbanology with my dad, Tony Rogers, on WHCR 90.3 FM New York.
Good afternoon. Tony Rogers here, your host for Urbanology, The Art of War. And for many of you who may be tuning in for the first time, The Art of War is actually my initials, William Anthony Rogers. But I also have taught, and I constantly write about the strategic genius of Sun Tzu, the author of the classic, The Art of War. So it's kind of a play on words, but has a lot to do with some of the things that have been my guiding path for some time. And speaking of guiding path, today is a pleasure because I have as a guest a friend from well over 40 years, a person who kind of introduced me to a lot of people and concepts that also has shaped my life as a young person, and it still has an influence in my writing, in my thinking, and who I am and who I'm not. I'd like to introduce you to Professor James Smalls.
Peace and blessings, Brother Tony, and to Urbanology audience. It's an honor, a great honor to be on this program and to be with this brother who has missed the continuity when it comes to serving the Black community. I mean, he never took a day off in all of the decades we've known one another. So good to see you, Tony.
Well, James, I had some really important influences. One of the interesting things that, as I had mentioned before, I was after the Panther Party, thought I wanted to be a lawyer, until I realized that it didn't work that way. But Hayward Burns was my mentor, and he was a little upset when I decided to do some other things, but and then of course he had his mysterious accident, which is another story. But one of the things that allowed for me to become focused is you introducing me to people like Dr. von Sadema and Dr. Ben and who I'd known from the Tree of Life. But when the lectures at City College were something special because there was no limitations and there was a great deal of freedom. Matter of fact, the Black Pre-Law Society started doing co-sponsoring it because it was so important to allow for people to hear this information from the lips of those scholars that really, at that time, as you know, because you was there was nothing that allowed for us to understand who we really were, and to understand it the way we did, I know has changed many people from our time, ourselves included. But what about that experience and how it has brought us to where we are?
Right. City College was an extraordinary experience that is still there. And we still have input and influence, I'm sure, to a great degree. But it lasted really under our greater influence from 1969 to 1999, which saw tens of thousands of young Black and brown children come through our hands who would not have had the opportunity to get access to higher education in the city of New York. And the thing we did when you and I was there, and our brother, God bless him, Tony Spencer, with Dr. Jeffries and others' leadership, we opened that university to the community. Mm-hmm. No other university in the country did that kind of opening to the community, inviting them to come up, to get involved in programs, to open community programs, and to find channels to bring young people into the university structure that wouldn't have. So we got to thank, Congressman Rango. We got to thank Basil Patterson. We have to thank Percy Sutton, who helped to create, the SEEK program. Without that, I would not have gone to City College.
Well, I guess many of us would
not have gone. And so that just opened a new pathway. And we had a chance. We were out here, you and I, we were struggling, in the most radical of the radical element. But we had a chance to really understand what political struggle was about, to understand the world through study and create a worldview and understand how to make our philosophies work at the most grassroots level, yet at the same time understand the bigger picture, that one must control the economic, politics, and culture where they live. That's not something peculiar to Black people's desire. Any successful community does that,
and I remember when we were talking about curriculum inclusion and the whole battle that Dr. Jeffries had to go through, based on true statements, and how there was court battles, but the victory of the court battles was, it was almost exciting as when people sort of other people who had been forcibly put into a certain type of judicial structure and overcame it. It was very motivating, to say the least, And,
well, one of the beautiful things about that battle, they tried to make it about Dr. Jeffries, but that was the centrifuge. Dr. Jeffries, Sister Adelaide Sanford, and other whites, Latinos, Native Americans had come up with probably one of the most fantastic curricular structure for the urban schools in America. And they were forces that did not want that curricula in the school system. So they picked what they thought was the soft target, to attack Dr. Leonard Jeffries in a way of stopping the state assembly from passing that curricula, so that it would be the status quo in the school system of the state of New York. The most ironic thing is right now they're trying to implement under another name that same curricula. Okay, they don't call it the curriculum of inclusion anymore, but word for word, that is the body of work that the New York City school system right now, the state of New York, is trying to integrate into the school system to expand the education scope of the children in the system. You know, and when children, which we've learned from this generation, thanks to hip hop music and rap and that culture that have brought the young from across the races together, when they know one another, their relationship to each other is different.
Right.
When they're no longer ignorant about one another's basic history, that thing we call racism is left beside the road somewhere. But someone has managed to stay in power, keeping the ethnic nations in America divided.
Not only in America.
Yeah, across the globe. You're right, across the globe.
In America.
Yes. And so the fight is to bring truth, like the t-shirt I got on it, I stand on truth. To bring truth, not as a philosophical thing or religious thing, but as historical scientific fact to the table, so the young people can develop a worldview and plan the future that they would like to see. You see,
Based
but
on
without that information, they're not going to be able to do that successfully.
Based on the foundation of the important things that of House of Cards, which was based on his story rather than history. Now, James, I know that you've been doing a lot of lecturing and teaching. I know that I think it was Hidden Colors. You did a piece with Hidden Colors, the documentary.
Right, Tariq Nasheed.
Yes,
I think I did about 4 or 5 of those.
Yeah. And you are currently, I think it's either Netflix or YouTube, the film that you're in that talks about the Godfather of Harlem and all that.
Whatever means necessary, but Martha from Martha and the Vandellas, and my favorite, most beautiful woman, Gladys Knight, who I've loved since I could remember breathing, and Herb Boyd, and many others. Yeah. And we did receive an award from the NACP for Best Director for that piece.
So you've still been doing a lot. Now, we were talking before the show a little bit about the whole Pan-African movement, and the thought patterns to start bringing a greater connection between the Africans in America and the Africans in Africa.
Right.
For such a long time, that divide, just like the curriculum, there's been, systematic efforts to separate and to make us ignorant of some of the things that and I know are the reality of things. Tell us a little bit about some of your work there and some of the talks and the Pan-African daily TV talks that you do, so people can learn a little bit more about what's going on as it relates to Africans in America and Africans in Africa.
Okay, let me just take license to let people know that you and I go back 40 plus years, almost 50 years, Tony.
Almost 50.
Dealing with the question of Pan-Africanism, working with the Black Panther Party, working with Malcolm X, OAAU. A lot of people don't see us back then, but we were there. We were the youth there then, trying to create a Pan-African world, reading Nkrumah's Little Black Book, at the time, reading Marcus Garvey, reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, trying to find a way to bring our people together. Matter of fact, a lot of us became Muslims because we thought that was a way of uniting with Africa. But then we realized there's probably more Africans who were Christians. We just weren't paying attention, And so what's going on now, there's a movement across the continent and have been, but it's growing with the young people. And it's called Building the Africa We Want to See. And one of the platforms I work with very closely is called the Pan-African Daily TV, under a sister named Dr. Susan Tata out of Cameroon. And we also work, Susan and that platform is working close with Sister Erakana, Dr. Erakana, who is with the African Union as its ambassador to the US. And we've been trying to build a platform by pulling many of the smaller platforms in Africa together with us so that we can be bigger than CNN in the African world for African interests in terms of both daily news, in terms of commentaries, in terms of looking at our economic situation, our political situation, our cultural situation. And one of the things we see as essential is that there must be a cultural revolution for African people. And when we say culture, we're not just talking about the dancing, the music, the sculpture, the painting, the theater, and so forth. Those are tools of culture. Culture is the idea of how you perceive yourself as a human being. And then you use those tools to interpret those ideas to yourself. And so we're trying to build a media that can present that on a daily basis to the African world, the Caribbean, Central South America, those of us with diasporans in Europe, and especially on the continent of Africa. We work with people in Madagascar, which is in the Indian Ocean, Mauritius Islands, which is even east of Madagascar, as a part of our network to bring the African world community together. And the Pan-African Daily TV, we reach all of North America, the Caribbean, Europe, and the continent of Africa. So our message is spread very wide. So we have people on like Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. Wade Noble, Malefi Asante, people like PLO Lumumba. We have the king, one of the most brilliant spiritual minds I've met lately, is one of the King Maputo of the Zulu nation, who broke down the African, I don't like the term spirituality, so I tend to want to favor a term I call African sacred science, which is a way of life as our ancient people and even today view our relationship to our environment, our ecology, and our relationship to the cosmology, and how we use that body of knowledge gathered from that to form our social ecology, how we get along with one another, and how we work with one another to support one another. And so that's kind of the foundation of Pan-African Daily TV. We work with other brothers who have platforms coming out of Angola, coming out of the Congo, coming out of Uganda, coming out of Ghana, coming out of Tanzania, coming out of Trinidad. And the hope is that we can link up enough of these networks that we become the biggest platform for news and commentary for our people worldwide. And at the same time, use it as a historical and educational forum that links the scholarship we have all over the world. Because we have some extraordinary scholarships, male and females, all over the world. And as Africans, we represent a population of nearly 3 billion people. We only may be the second largest population. We may indeed be the first. On the continent of Africa itself, we have 1,700,000,000+ people. Of that population, 40% is below the age of 26. That's our future. So how do we create the African we want to see using this modern technology of media to instruct, to inform our people? And that's why I love what y'all are doing with Urbanology, because this is exactly what we want to do. Have conversations on how we come together to do the most fundamental. And the most fundamental is show our people how to provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security for themselves and their families. You see, and sometimes we forget that. You think, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, but why do you want to be the doctor? Why do you want to be the lawyer? I want a job. Why do you want a job? You want to provide the basic food, clothing, shelter, security, and safety. So that's what we're trying to instruct on across the country, across the continent, across the world. This concept of being in control of economic, politics, and culture where you live. A dictum I get from Malcolm X, and somebody said, Mr. Malcolm X, what do you mean by Black nationalism? He said, you must own and control the economic, politics, and culture where you live. Every successful community in the world does that. And if we're going to be a successful community, whether it's in Harlem, Bed-Stuy, South Bronx, or Nigeria, Senegal, or Ghana, we've got to control the economic, politics, and culture where we live. We have to control land, labor, and resources where we live. That's what the discussion is about.
Well, I think that, again, it's important. Dr. Woodhouse, I see, her comment was—
Hi, Dr. Woodhouse. I love that First World Alliance.
The First World Alliance to keep me focused on our culture. What can we do to keeping the truth about our culture and our story to the generations, especially since the education system wants to get rid of or minimize our story. Right. And again, you were just saying, the things like the Pan-African daily TV, Soul City TV, as Matt McCoy often says, to, change the narrative that—
Yes.
Change, the narrative so that we can speak to ourselves and speak about, ourselves. One of the things that, James, has always been a mystery to me, as well as the world, is in ancient Kemet, there was certain types of archaeological and geometry and science that was used, that the question is, where did that knowledge go? Because
that's a beautiful question, Tony, because the answer is going to be shocking. That is the very knowledge that Western civilization is using and calling it their science. Okay? It's like, we were told that term, when we are fighting white supremacy, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the baby is you. You see? And
that's true. I mean, I know about how the Greeks took stuff and how all of information that, again, seems almost impossible. The Great Pyramid of Giza and how it's aligned with the cosmos before telescopes, before tools were made, for the large blocks. Mm-hmm. That and around the world, I mean, the 7 wonders of the world. Now, of course, there are theories about ancient aliens, which is starting to go again. People are starting to say that, the government just came out a report saying that they can't say that it is, but they can't say that it's not.
Right.
Well, but even that, there's certain knowledge that even now we as humans have no understanding of how that happened. What's your thought as to where did that knowledge go?
Well, that one day, let me just do this caveat first. History will look at the wealth of America and its technology and ascribe it to aliens rather to the enslaved Africans that created it. Okay. and then I'll come to your question. That's just to put it in a context where people can make sense of the question. The knowledge didn't go anywhere. It is the knowledge that's building America. That knowledge that we had in Kemet, that we had in the Niger Valley, the Senegal Valley, and Monomotapa in South Africa and Zimbabwe, that body of science, that body of knowledge is why they went to Africa. They took it, they got it. They took our books. It fills the museums and the libraries of Europe today. And they're slowly, over the years, deciphering that ancient science and utilizing what they've deciphered. What we call Western science is really African spirituality and whiteface, if you want to put it the way I would put it. Mm-hmm. Because somehow we've allowed them to separate God from the rest of creation. But in the African concept of theocracy, you're not separated from God. And I'll give you just a quick one, then I want to answer a little more of that question. A woman gives birth to a baby and carries it in her womb for 9 months, 10 months. That is that aspect of God that creates. Babies don't drop out of the skies, don't grow out of the ground. Storks don't deliver them. If God is the creator, then the woman is that aspect of God that creates humans. That's how African culture sees it, you see. Rather than God up there and you down here, no, we're an integral part of divinity, but with our own peculiarity. That's the culture and the science that allow us to see the universe without a telescope, because we understood our role in it. Mm-hmm. Plato, which is one of their greatest philosophers, and Plato wrote a book. In college, I know you had it and I had it. They gave us the Republic, mm-hmm. which was Aristotle's writing on Plato. Mm-hmm. But Plato wrote something called the Phaedra, or the Phaedrus, mm-hmm. Phedrus. And there's this guy named Kajari who wrote a piece called The History of Mathematics. And in his introductory first chapter, second paragraph, he quotes Plato from the Phaedrus. And Plato says, and those days, the Greeks call us Ethiopians, the black-faced one, the burnt-faced ones. Plato said the Ethiopians gave the world all of its sciences. This is Plato. This is a big boy. This is the top man, okay? I don't need nothing else. Their main man says in Phaedrus, according to Kajari, and I have a copy of Phaedrus myself, a couple of copies now, that the African, who he called the Ethiopian, gave the world all of its sciences. And then he begins to name them: arithmetic, geometry, medicine, druce, astronomy. This is Plato, okay? And then he concludes, and he says, the greatest science of all the African gave to the world is the science of writing itself. And see, when you keep knowledge away from people and they don't see what their possibilities were, they don't know what their possibilities are. Mm. And that's why this fight. If Black history is meaningless and is nothing, then let us have it. If it doesn't have any worth, let us have it. But our history is simply our ancestral experiences with nature and cosmology and the human interaction with the two. And what is the scientific results of those interactions? And so we can look at the Ryan mathematic papyri, which is in the British Museum, which is the mathematic books they took from Kemet. And I think is problem number 16. The African had already solved pi long before Pythagoras. That's it. So that's why it's important for young people not to think history is mundane. It is an important tool in allowing you to form your worldview and to see your greater possibilities. So you can constantly recreate yourself to be better than you were yesterday.
As long as the history is based on fact and not his story.
Right, absolutely.
Because
and that's why our young people now, we're seeing more of them going into anthropology, archaeology, paleontology, areas we were not even allowed to go in. Geology. I remember at City College, we had one Black geologist. I forgot that brother's name. And I said, why they guard that so?
Hmm.
But when you understand what a geologist is able to do, to tell you where the wealth is located in the world and what is the value of that wealth that's located in the world, you don't want Black people to know about that, because you're trying to take the wealth away from them without them knowing they even have the wealth, you know?
Matter of fact, I think it was Dr. Ben who said once that Egypt is the only place that there is a, a curriculum about. There's no Egyptology or Europology, but
Right.
Egyptology was to be able to make sure that the information that came out of Kemet was controlled.
Right.
I never will forget as relates to, which is, if you remember the Richard Pryor show
when he goes to that pit and the tomb,
he's in the tomb, and he's carrying, the bags, and they open up the tomb. He goes in with the torch, and he looks around, and he says, "Oh wow, that looks like my cousin, man. That look like my brother. You told me these people were Black." And then you see the guys fold up their paper and they locked them in here because they didn't want that information to come out. But
there's one institution, Tony, and I always mention it. Some of the brothers say, maybe you're talking about, I'm a Prince Hall Freemason.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of brothers started, how you going to be a revolutionary and a Black nationalist? No. Prince Hall was one of our first Black nationalist revolutionary people. He opened one of the first public schools for Black people in America, if not for anybody in America. And from its history in 1776 and its establishment in 1784, the Free African Lodge, this community of Eastern Stars and Prince Hall brothers have been involved in every element of Black development, including Black Wall Street, including the life of Malcolm X, including the life of Marcus Garvey, Booker T. Washington, Dr. King, W.B. Du Bois, and we can go on. Mm. It's one of those historical threads we need to understand. And if you understand that Prince Hall as a what I consider to be one of the first Black universities in America, because when we couldn't go to school, couldn't go to university, we went to Prince Hall to learn about nursing. We learned about bookkeeping, learned about accounting. We learned about sewing. We learned about carpentry and bricklaying. That was the continuing education modem for the Black community before the first Black university. And so I always raised my brothers on 155th Street, Cornerstone 37, very proud of it. And it is not something to run away from. It is where a lot of our history is embedded in North America particularly, and we need to study it and learn that history.
Interesting.
And the foundation of it comes straight out of Kemet, straight out of Egypt.
Yeah, well, all of the signs are there. It's a kind of interesting concept. I do know that my dad, I still have a lot of his stuff. He was a Mason, and his oils and all of those things. We. Mm-hmm. And again, but you did make a very interesting point as it relates to what happened as the education and the services that were provided by the Masons. What is your thoughts about the future? Where do you see us going?
I think our future is as bright as it ever was. I think this generation of our youth is the greatest generation we've ever produced. They're certainly the most educated and the most trained generation we've ever produced. We have more college education in this last generation than we've had in the 10 generations before. We turn on that TV any given day, and especially our female population, and you see us all over the television screen in every possible category you can think of, being the authority and the fact givers on those things. We look at the Democratic Party and we see that Africans led by our sisters are the dominant force in that party. So there's no accident why we got a Joe Biden or we got a Barack Obama twice, because there's a foundation that we don't see in the Democratic Party that is educated Black people who've come out mainly out of the historical Black colleges and the university structures and have become the best of the best in this nation. If you look at Wall Street, maybe we're not the CEO, but look just down below the CEO and see who you see running much of industry in America. And you will find an extraordinary contribution being given by our people. The same thing in the educational system across the country. We have a lot of ground to make up, yes. And what the media have done is focus on our 3% bottom or our 4% bottom instead of our 96% middle and top. And then we began to have a discussion about the 4% of the homeless, those who are in the criminal network on the bottom. And we go, wait a minute, we got 96% of people who've got home, run businesses, have jobs, have degrees in politics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have to change the dynamic of the discussion. Yes, we are obligated to help our brothers and sisters in that 3% because they have been used to create jobs for the other ethnic nation. Look at who's the police force. What is the most police precincts in the country have become nepotistic. The father's there, the brother's there, the sister's there, the uncle is there, and they're all from the European ethnic communities. And so policing in America have become a family business for mainly European people. Fire departments have become family business for mainly European people. We managed to get some edge on the prison system with the guards there. But we need to look and see how this thing really works. If I had my druthers, Tony, I would take every young Black man graduating from every high school in America this year at age 18, invite them to go in the American military for 2 years. That's what the other groups are doing. Get trained, get skills, get tooled, come back home with money to pay for your education, come back home with other kinds of benefits, come back home where you get a foot up on all the civil service exams so you can become the only way we'll stop violence in the Black community is when the Black man and woman become the policing instrument of the Black community, and nothing else will stop it. Okay, they can come up with any program they want. The other thing that is leading to the violence in our community, that have this discussion about the 3% instead of the 96%, is the education system. You cannot tell me you're an education system and you produce a population that can't read, can't write, have no skills, have no tools to get a job, and dump them in the streets of America to be cannon fodder for the prison system, to keep employed certain other ethnic groups who have been running that system for decades on decades on decades. So the discussion has to be, who are we really? I'm Professor James Small. I come from Acadia Plantation. I'm the first in my family to go to a college. I'm married to Carol Eleanor Tandu. She come from Aruba, first in her family to go to college. She's a medical doctor. We have children who are everything from school principals to guidance counselors to running their own business. If in one generation, given the opportunity which City College gave to me and my wife, and that's where we got that opportunity, which was given to us by Charlie Rangel, Basil Patterson, Dave Dinkins, and others who were fighting, Geraldine Daniels, to produce the SEEK program in college discovery. So you got to link the things up, see? Otherwise, they'll get rid of the things that help you, and we don't realize those were the stepping stones we need to replicate and improve upon today. So if my family can come out of what was called poverty to where our generation that Carol and I have produced are now middle class, but thank God, all fighting on behalf of African American and African peoples. I bless to thank God for that so much, that they stayed connected to their communities. But we aren't the only one that was able to do that, Tony. You did it in your generation, your family. Others we know did it in their family. And the generation we produced is doing it even better. So why don't we hear the discussion about them on the television? We don't hear about them. We heard about the kid shot somebody in Times Square. We heard about the kid did a drive-by. But we don't hear about the fact that the kid that did the drive-by was taken away from his mother and father when he was 4 years old, kept in some youth home until he was 18, dumped out in the streets with one welfare check and without a high school degree. Let's have that conversation. Let's talk who those kids are that you've hurt so badly, took all hope from.
Plus, as you said, with the privatizing of the prison system,
yes,
it's another component of that link. In upstate New York, many of the small towns, small prison towns, all of their economy is going around prisons.
Absolutely.
So that's why if you're driving through there and you're black and you don't have,
you might not make it home.
You might not make it home. You know?
And you remember, once you privatize prison, then you got to guarantee the commodity.
Yeah.
So that means at the local level, the police and the city council people must be involved in a legalistic process that guarantees they can send people to the prison system.
Exactly. So there are no breaks. And when you throw in systematic racism, obviously, it's obvious why the majority of people who are in prison are black and brown. Speaking of which, as the state now has legalized cannabis, many of these young people who are in prison will be coming out.
Yes.
And
but, Tony, they have been so damaged, so injured, left so hopeless, that unless we put together some sort of an apprenticeship program on the likes of what Booker T. Washington did at Tuskegee University, we're not going to be able to help them when they do come home.
I guess the issue is, how do you do that? How do you create the type of momentum where people who are coming out will gravitate to?
It should be made a part of the process. That there's a program out here that will teach you house wiring, plumbing, carpentry, painting, computer science, nursing technology, medical assistance, that these things already exist. How do we organize the institution so that it interfaces with the correctional facilities, so that when the young people coming home, part of the coming home is that you must enter this educational process as a way of making you an income-producing individual in the community you're coming back to.
With the understanding that the correction facilities are losing, they're losing their revenue.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily interested. Well, they want them to come back, because.
Yeah, and so that's where we have to carry on the political fight on the ground in the community. I think you remember, what was it? Animation House on 125th Street. I forgot the brother that ran it.
Mm-hmm.
And me and Dr. Scobie ran a program there for a while. It was called The First 100 Days.
Mm-hmm.
We found that when we can keep the young people away from the old community, away from the old habits for the first 100 days, we had a 75% non-returners. The recidivism was only 25%. You see?
That's interesting.
So we know it could be done. Automation House, but it's closed now. But the concept is still there.
Well, again, the things that we have to do, and there has to be, again, programs such as what you're doing, the Soul City TVs, the communication networks, because one of the things that are happening is that people are dealing with social media. They're doing things that we didn't have then.
Right.
So there's another way to communicate that wasn't really available to us. Mm-hmm. If it was, we would be in a different place now, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. But these young people are creating a lot of businesses for themselves, and they're being able to enhance and expand businesses because of social media. And so that's an important piece to see. And what social media is allowing now is for African American entrepreneurs to partner with continental African entrepreneurs in multiple industries, the textile industry, the music industry, and the technical industry, and the medical industry, and especially in the tourism industry. Mm-hmm. me and a group of African Americans 16 years ago formed a group called the African American, it's a corporation in Ghana, African American Management Company Ghana Limited.
Mm.
And we have the largest African American business in the central region of Ghana. It's called the Sana Lives Hotel Enterprise Limited.
Mm.
Most people don't even know we exist, but we are one of multiple other African American businesses in West Africa that need to use social media to expose ourselves as models and examples of what can be done.
And which is the important thing, which is why I'm blessed to have become part of the orbit of Soul City or WHCR or the newspapers, because communication is important. Our own narrative is important. There are things that, James, that you're doing. We need to have more outlets, more distribution so that people can be aware of these things. You're absolutely correct. If you don't have anything to bounce off of, you tend not to do anything at all.
Right.
So these things are wonderful, but as the old philosophical statement, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a noise?
Yeah.
So,
and you're absolutely right. And that's why what you're doing with Urbanology, with Soul City, is WHCR, is absolutely needed. And it must be expanded. And I'm going to make sure I introduce you and Matt to Sister Susan. And there's another network we have here in America. It's called Happy, HAPI. Okay.
HAPI.
And Felicia Harden is one of the executives, and she lives right there in Harlem. And what we put out a movie, which is going to be in about 16 theaters in a week, on economic development in the Black community nationally, right? And we're using Kemet to make the model, to do the metaphor. The word happy represents, that was the original name of the Nile River. And so what we're saying is like happy, that big, beautiful river that created the magnificent civilization that built the pyramids, started as tiny little tributaries in the Congo, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Ethiopia, Sudan. But all those tiny little tributaries came together and produced this enormously forceful river that brought all that silt that allowed people to plant and to make money and end up building the biggest civilization in the world. Well, why can't we find all the little tributaries in Harlem and the little tributaries in South Chicago and the little economic tributaries in Bed-Stuy and bring them together to form our happy river of today?
Sounds interesting.
Yeah,
and happy is...
Go to Happy.
Would that be the name of the movie?
Yeah, the movie is called Happy. You can go to happyfilms.com or to Happy Talk. HAPI.
Happyfilms.com.
Yeah. And I'll also introduce you to Felicia and the other brothers who are at the top of that network as well.
Which is interesting, because again, the way that we allow for what we were talking about to take place is to maximize. This is as we were saying with the Nile River, the technology streams, those packets coming together to create a larger source, a larger Pan-African daily, using all of the different types of networks that are out there to provide the angle that people can relate to. Those are the types of things that is part of bringing those pockets together. But I think that, what's the most important from a African side, I'm going to start using African science rather than spirituality.
African sacred science. African sacred science.
African sacred science to to begin to understand how, as we were saying, your name came to my mind, my card. I think you said you saw something else about me. I saw something about you.
The day before, and then you call. So that's sacred spirit. That's the energy of the ancestors.
And all things happen for a reason, so there's no coincidence. But even when we were young, when I was trying to sell Panther newspapers on campus, you tell me that wasn't a good idea. All of those things lead up to who we are now. And we might not have known then, but we were in the process of preparing ourselves, learning and developing the relationships so that as we became a little more seasoned and understanding certain things, we have a foundation to go through. I don't have to, no one can tell me about James Brown. I mean, James Small. I lived with this brother for a long period of time, so I know him. You know, I know where he's coming
from. Africa.
That's right. That's, you know, there's so many Blackfrica, which is another concept that a lot of people don't know about, but that's how the chamber, that was before Harlem Week, the chamber and all those other things. But we will continue this kind of conversation, James, because we're at the point now, it's, the Black Lives Matter and what has happened on the last 15 months is an awakening. But when we start to talk about economics,
that's the key.
Again, and maybe you can explain this to me as whether it was theory. There had been a time where there was an organization or an effort to get many of the African countries to come together and create a note. Gaddafi was in the head of that. Matter of fact, they say that's why he was killed. Because if these countries could come together to use their natural resources to float a note, it would probably, because most money is fiat money that doesn't have anything to back it, would create the type of economic structure that the world would not be able to deal with. What's your thought of that theory, and is there something that is close to that may happen in the future?
Well, I think President Gaddafi, who I did get to meet once at the Pan-African Conference in Uganda, was the mouthpiece for a point of view that was coming from Zimbabwe, Uganda, Rwanda, and it was a very correct position and probably did cost him his life. But it hasn't stopped. Africa has to continue, and we Africans have to continue the work to consolidate and to aggregate African wealth, African technical knowledge and understanding. Our sister just put up a post on how we must use Soul City to bring there. She's put it up again. She said, I don't want to read this because it's important. Mm-hmm. I think that all minds have to come together. We are still fragmented. We have to know what everyone else is doing. In Soul City Broadcasting Network, we have a powerful tool to get to our people the information and knowledge that needs to be shared, and distribution is necessary. What Gaddafi and them, when they were making that move, they were not able to really bring everybody else on board because they weren't able to really do that kind of information distribution that would have brought the kind of force that would have saved his life. Mm-hmm. America, sadly, because of its ignorance towards its own citizenry, the African American, here you are, America. You're being outmaneuvered in Africa by China for natural resource arrangements. Yet you've got 60 to 70 million Africans in your nation that have been here from the founding of the nation, and you can't create a relationship between that population, which will allow them to create a relationship with their mother population so that our nation will be the favored nation, and we'd use the technology of America to help build the technological infrastructure of Africa, And Africa will use its natural wealth to help maintain the infrastructure of America. But that would mean America have to move away from its imperialism. It has to move away from its exploitation of African people. It has to take on the human persona of democracy it claims to have, but don't really have. And so that's part of what we're fighting for. It's either the ballot or the bullet. And I think we've used the ballot very well. And when people say black people don't vote, and I say, how did all them black people get in office across the country? The thousands and thousands. So stop saying that. We may have to escalate our voting.
And that's why they're trying to stop. If they don't vote, they wouldn't be trying to change the election.
Right. And so we wouldn't have gotten Obama twice without black people voting. We wouldn't have gotten Bill Clinton twice without black people voting. We wouldn't have gotten the Biden without black people voting. And study our voting arc. And I wanted to get this in. From the 1950s to now, the black voting arc have dipped only twice, people. Twice. Study it, our voting patterns. And we'll stop saying that. We may say we need to expand the foundation of our voting. We need to bring more people into the net so we'll have even greater power. But be aware of the power you have so people don't use your power and deny you services by pretending you didn't have that power.
Well, James, we're getting close. Again, there's so many things that goes in my mind that we could talk about. I mean, as you say, it's been about 50 years. There's a lot of stuff
That's true.
that we can't talk about. But at some point, we need to come back together. Matter of fact, we should find a way to promote. There's a conference, I think you said, that's going to be in December.
Right.
We need to figure out how we can promote that, how we can make sure that we can use our ability to let as many people know about it as possible, or attract investors or other people to do that. So the collaboration might be important. But of all of the things that have come out of this, James, is coming kind of full circle. The things that we have to do now, just as we look at Black Lives Matter in the United States, we have to understand how to begin to reconnect with Africa.
Yes.
African lives matter also.
Absolutely.
It's up to us to do that. And now we have the technology that we can.
Yes.
So,
and I will do everything I can to get to you the body of information so you can be in touch with those who I'm in touch with. And I'd like the same thing coming from you. And I know Matt was talking about an economic conference in August. I think it's significant and important that we push and develop and invite certain African elements to come into that conference as well.
Who would like to invest in America and who they would like Americans to invest there, to have that type of conversation, because that begins to be a game changer, to begin to understand how that relationship can begin to develop. Even if we just talk about tourism related stuff, which is
the second or third largest industry in the world. Don't play tourism cheap. I have a tour company for the last 35 years, Cultural Heritage African Tours.
Yeah.
And we work the African continent.
So we'll talk about that and connect with the company with the Harlem Tourism Board. And again, James, thank you for the many years of friendship and the stuff that you've done. And you can catch James again by any means necessary is on social media. And there's a lot of different, if you Google Professor James Smalls, or go on YouTube, you'll be able to hear the wisdom of the brother who I'm happy to say we came up together.
We did.
Much of the same
on the real side. we really did.
So, so I know that, things all happen for a reason.
Yes, sir.
And, again, happy to see your face. We'll be seeing more of you.
Yes.
And we need to really put the African connection past conversation and see how we can put it some action towards it.
May I put just one other thing in? I hope people go and watch Godfather of Harlem, because I'm the primary historical consultant on that piece. And much of what you're seeing is me trying to force our history into the fiction that Hollywood was trying to present. So,
which is another conversation that we'll have. I didn't want to get into that, but you educated me about a lot of that stuff. But that would have been the whole program, and I wanted to get into this African thing.
Yes.
But next time we'll get into that, because obviously there's a part 2 and part 3 with the James Small conversation, because there's just so much stuff. But congratulations with all of the work that you've done. Give my regards to the family. And thank you, James. We'll be in contact.
Yes, sir. Peace and blessings. Peace
and blessings. We'll be back next week. Thank Matt McCoy for his ongoing support. And for those who celebrate, happy 4th of July, even though our 4th of July was really Juneteenth, but it's an excuse maybe to do some things. So we'll have him back. And we'll make sure that I see, please have James Small back. I agree, we will, because there's so many things that we didn't hit that are very interesting, that we'll do that. So thanks again. This is Tony. I'll see you next week in July. So we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
This is Kia Rogers, and you're listening to Urbanology with my dad, Tony Rogers, on WHCR 90.3 FM New York.
We are the sons and daughters of the soul. We are resilient and forever forward-thinking. We ask for nothing else than the opportunity to live and to create the lives that we were meant to live. We want nothing but an equal chance at options and possibilities. The same possibilities and options to live out our potential as our fellow man. We want to be heard, understood, and expressive in our reality. We are the future. We are the creative. We are here.